Tonight on NewsWatch, the Defense of Marriage Act is struck down, so now what? We'll take a look at the fallout and where we go from here. Plus, one side is cheering, the other is reeling after yesterday's Supreme Court rulings. How should the church respond? We'll take a closer look. And the secret Christians of Kyrgyzstan, why they risk their own safety to share the gospel with their Muslim neighbors. All this and more tonight on NewsWatch. The president says Wednesday's Supreme Court rulings on marriage are a victory for American democracy. Good evening. I'm Mark Martin. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie disagrees, calling the move to erase part of the Federal Defense of Marriage Act a bad decision and an example of judicial supremacy. For many Christians, the question now is what the rulings mean for religious freedom. Heather Sells has the latest.
Speaking while on tour in Africa, the president praised the Supreme Court decisions and acknowledged concerns about religious liberty.
When it comes to people's personal views and their religious faith, etc., I think we have to respect the diversity of views that are there. But when it comes to how the state treats people, how the law treats people, I believe that everybody has to be treated equally.
But how that tension plays out is unclear. What worries many in the faith community, Justice Kennedy writing that, quote, animus against gays motivated Congress to pass the Defense of Marriage Act. The Family Research Council now fears discrimination lawsuits against Christians that don't support gay marriage. And Thomas Peters at the National Organization for Marriage says the president's narrow view of religious freedom is also a concern.
By saying that you're not going to be forcing pastors to do a same-sex marriage, that implies that Christians only have their rights when they're within their church walls. Christians have the full First Amendment rights to stand for marriage in the public square, in their businesses.
On the 700 Club, the ACLJ's Jay Sekulow said he's already heard from a number of concerned pastors, but cautioned against overreacting.
I think the reaction needs to be measured, and measured means, look, really, other than the federal benefits going, I'm not saying that's insignificant, it's the status quo as it was before. 38 states, I think, do not allow same-sex marriage.
What is clear, change at the federal level is already underway. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel says the Pentagon is working to extend benefits to the spouses of gay military members, and gay activists are doing more than just celebrating. They've already filed legislation that would give gay married couples federal benefits in all 50 states. The Respect for Marriage Act would effectively repeal DOMA by ensuring that state of ceremony trumps state of residence. Heather Sells, CBN News.
While Proposition 8 supporters say they'll continue to fight for traditional marriage, they argue that another issue is at stake. The court ignored the will of the people, a disturbing event for any democracy.
Same-sex marriage is essentially legal now in California, and the media is ablaze with celebrating supporters. But backers of Proposition 8 say the Supreme Court has set a dangerous precedent where the will of the voters no longer matters.
The decision of marriage should be left to the people. When the people validly enact a law to limit marriage to one man and one woman, it should be the people who decide whether that law should be reversed.
My initial reaction was, it's a new kind of tyranny. It's where the courts advocate social justice over social structure and social traditions and standards.
Even Justice Kennedy, who voted to strike down DOMA, sided with California voters who approved Prop 8, stating, quote, "The essence of democracy is that the right to make law rests in the people and flows to the government, not the other way around. The California initiative process embodies these principles and has done so for over a century."
If someone doesn't like a proposition that's passed in the state of California, arguably all they would have to do is find one judge, one federal judge, to declare it unconstitutional, and then get a wink and a nod from the Attorney General and the Governor, and it's over. And I think that's a terrible, terrible situation to have for the voters to have their votes count and to have their votes respected in the proper system.
It will take at least 25 days before the Supreme Court's ruling becomes official and gay marriages resume in California. If supporters of Proposition 8 ask for a rehearing, then gay marriages may still be barred beyond the 25-day period. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Joining us now with more is Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel. Matt, the High Court did not invalidate Prop 8. Instead, it ruled that the residents of California do not have the right to defend the law they passed. But what's the end result? Will Prop 8 die?
Prop 8's not going to die. What's ultimately going to happen is more litigation. You've got several things going on. First of all, this particular decision now just goes back to the trial court decision, which means the northern district or the northern half of California. It does not affect the central or the southern part of California. That's governed by other district courts, and therefore it doesn't have any applicability. But even beyond that, the question is whether it even has applicability in the northern part of the San Francisco greater area of North California location. And the answer probably is not. Why? Because the state constitution of California says that agencies, which would include these agencies that issue licenses for marriage, must abide by the law unless it's overturned by an appellate court. And we have no appellate court ruling.
Gay activists are vowing to force gay marriage on every state within 5 years. Is that possible when so many states have constitutional amendments protecting traditional marriage?
It may not be possible, but certainly they're going to try. The problem is that in the decision handed down by Justice Kennedy, he gave them a lot of fodder. He gave no constitutional analysis, no equal protection clause analysis. It's not based on any previous court precedent and not based on the Constitution itself. But he gave them a lot of names and a lot of vitriolic kind of emotional information that they can use. He basically engaged in a name-calling contest and essentially assumed that anyone who believes in marriage as one man and one woman is a hater.
Matt, is America still governed by the rule of law or by the rule of unelected judges?
Unfortunately, I think this decision by the United States Supreme Court is going to go down in history as an illegitimate decision. I think it delegitimizes the Supreme Court. I think it does a disservice to the Supreme Court in the same way that Dred Scott did when the court ruled that blacks did not have any rights to citizenship, in the same way that, for example, the Buck versus Bell decision said that you could force people to be sterilized in order to stop the birth of so-called imbeciles, and the way that Korematsu case said that you could intern Japanese Americans simply because of their ethnicity. We've repudiated those decisions. They are illegitimate decisions. They're not based on the Constitution or the rule of law or natural law. And I think the same thing is true of this decision regarding DOMA.
All right, Matt Staver of the Liberty Counsel. Thank you, Matt, for your time and your insights today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
This week's abortion battle is far from over in Texas. Governor Rick Perry has called a second special legislative session to give the Republican-controlled State House another shot at passing abortion restrictions. The restrictions on abortion were blocked by a filibuster from Senator Wendy Davis, but political observers say they will likely pass when that special session begins July 1st. Opponents say the measures could close nearly all abortion clinics in the Lone Star State. There is no evidence that the IRS targeted progressive groups in the same way they did Tea Party groups seeking tax exemption. That's according to a top Treasury watchdog. In a letter to Congress, Tax Inspector General J. Russell George acknowledged the term progressive appeared on a list flagged by the organization, but said he did not have reason to believe their applications were set aside for further scrutiny. This comes as Chief of the Internal Revenue Service, David Werfel, faced further questioning from the House Ways and Means Committee today. Werfel acknowledged the same findings under his own investigation. This is his third appearance before Congress since being appointed to lead the troubled agency last month. President Obama is in Senegal today. It is the first stop on his week-long trip to Africa. The president is visiting 3 countries. The trip is aimed at overcoming disappointment in Africa that America's first black president did not give more attention to it during his first term. The president will also be visiting South Africa and Tanzania, and he's expected to be greeted warmly. The trip is expected to cost up to $100 million, and some congressional Republicans have questioned that expense when the budget sequester has led to spending cuts in government agencies. Coming up, will Christians lose rights as homosexuals gain ground? And how should the church respond? Yesterday's Supreme Court rulings on gay marriage raise a crucial question. How should the church respond to a culture that seems increasingly hostile to Christianity and Christian principles? Here to talk about that is news anchor for the 700 Club, Lee Webb. Lee has also served as an elder in a local church for nearly 20 years. Welcome, Lee.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be here.
How should we as the church respond to all of this?
Well, Mark, I believe that the age-old argument that our nation was founded by godly men who implemented biblical principles seems really not to carry that much weight any longer. And I think we may need to refrain from placing all of our energy on that argument. With good reason, we are concerned about our culture. You know, I went back and read part of the late Chuck Colson's book, The God of Stones and Spiders, and I posted this on my Facebook page, and it's gotten quite a response, almost 10,000 views.
Wow.
Colson calls Christians to resist the notion to circle the wagons and seek special treatment as a persecuted minority, much like gays have. He said we shouldn't do that. He asked this question: where does today's hostility towards Christians leave us? He said basically where the church has always been, at odds with the world. But that doesn't mean retreat. And Mark, what I think Colson was saying there is that stop being surprised by persecution. If you are acting in a Christ-like manner, you can expect persecution. Jesus told us that if they persecuted him, they're certainly going to persecute us.
Well, Lee, how do you counter the argument of this person who wrote on your Facebook post? He said, Chuck is telling Christians to go to sleep and let the devil have his way, so just stand there and let them make you yield to their rights to sin? How do you respond to that?
Well, Colson wasn't saying go to sleep. Remember, he said this is no time to retreat. He's telling us, I believe, to engage the culture in a different way. And, you know, our authority, Mark, and our power as Christians is not derived by any government institution. It's from Almighty God. Therefore, we don't need to act like defensive little children trying to defend ourselves against the bullies on the playground like we did when we were kids. It's in our weakness that God's power is made strong. That is the power of the gospel. You know, Chuck Colson went on to write, we must defend the truth lovingly, winsomely, letting others see in all we do the excellence of him who has called us from darkness into light. And Mark, let me give you an example of that. I just talked to a good friend of mine in Florida. His pastor at their church, a couple of gay guys, a homosexual couple, moved in next door to the associate pastor. These two homosexuals assumed that they were going to be shunned or treated with some level of hostility. Instead, the pastor and his wife loved on these two guys. They showed fellowship and friendship. To make a long story short, this pastor and his family led both of those men, both of these homosexuals, to faith in Jesus Christ. Those men have now left the homosexual lifestyle. They're part of this church in Florida, and they're leading a life that no one could have imagined just a few years ago. That is the power of the gospel. That's a different kind of warfare, and frankly, I think we need to stop using that kind of terminology, warfare and this, you know, those kinds of things really only antagonize an unbelieving world.
We need to speak the truth in love.
Absolutely.
And the Bible is very clear about that. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Up next, secret Christians in a former Soviet republic risking their lives to share the gospel with their Muslim neighbors.
From CBN.
Broken Eardrum is playing at the Civic tonight.
And you'll just have to miss it.
This is so incredibly unfair.
A special story of love and sacrifice.
Joy, Mom comes up with something.
Christopher Quantum, you and I are going to discuss your attitude right this minute. Superbook.
No.
Join the Superbook DVD Club and get Superbook's newest episode, He is Risen. Plus 2 copies to share with others. All for your gift of $25.
They have arrested Jesus, the Messiah. Do you not know that I have the power to crucify you?
No! Please! You can't! They've taken him to Golgotha. We must hurry. Mary is about to lose her son. The worst thing any mother could face. I am not leaving her.
Superbook. It's an amazing way to build a strong spiritual foundation in the children you love.
Mary, who are you looking for?
I've seen him! He is alive!
Superbook. He is Risen. Available now.
33 Mexican evangelicals are grateful to be alive after being captured and tortured by Catholic villagers in Chiapas, Mexico. They've since been released. The Voice of the Martyrs Mexico reports the evangelicals were attempting to return to their homes near San Cristobal after 3.5 years of forced exile. Pastor Armando, pictured here, says he and others were hung by a rope and doused with gasoline. They barely escaped with their lives. 5 were hospitalized. Village leaders also seized Pastor Estras Alonso of the Eagles Wings Church. He's a longtime defender of freedom to worship in Chiapas. Leftist and traditionalists have forced more than 35,000 evangelicals from their homes in Chiapas during the past 35 years. Muslim radicals in Nigeria have murdered a Christian pastor by slitting his throat. The Reverend Jacob Kwaiza was a retired pastor with the Church of Christ in Nigeria. Last week, Islamists hunted him down near Maiduguri, according to witnesses who fled the scene. The Muslims ordered the pastor to renounce his Christian faith and convert to Islam. When he refused, the Muslims slashed his throat. Islamic extremists also torched at least 4 churches in that area, and the Muslim terrorist group Boko Haram murdered at least 16 high school students there because they were receiving Western education. The gunmen mowed them down at their desks. Well, as you know, Christians face hostility in many countries, including our own. Last winter, George Thomas got exclusive access to a secret gathering of believers in a former Soviet republic. We have disguised their names and identity to protect their lives.
The setting could not have been more ideal.
This is a beautiful location. 70% of the country is mountainous. Locals call it the second Switzerland of Asia.
This is the mountains of Kyrgyzstan.
Our goal was to find a safe place away from the city to not draw attention of the authorities.
For a few days, Vitali and a handful of Christians gathered in this secluded villa tucked away in the mountains, about a 2-hour drive outside the capital city, Bishkek.
We worship, pray, and strategize how to effectively share the love of Christ in our countries.
CBN News cannot show you their faces or reveal their real names for security reasons. In this room are secret believers from Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Tajikistan, all former Soviet republics in Central Asia, experiencing a rising tide of hostilities against believers. All are members of a Christian ministry that's reaching young people in the former Soviet Union.
It is practically impossible to openly share about Jesus Christ. Doing so will get you beaten, arrested, or killed.
Marat is a youth leader from Uzbekistan. Last year was a difficult year for you.
Fortunately, I wasn't arrested, but I was repeatedly interrogated by secret police, accused of gathering people in my house. They said that what I was doing is illegal.
He runs an informal Christian school training Uzbek leaders.
The pressure is unrelenting. You can't relax. You're constantly under stress. You cannot trust anyone because you don't know if they'll turn you in or accuse you of proselytizing.
Daoud is from Kazakhstan, the largest of the 5 Central Asian countries. There were no Kazakh Christians back in 1990. Today, however, there are 15,000. But strict religion laws make it very difficult for churches to register.
According to our law, you cannot attend church until you are 18 years old. That means we cannot hold youth meetings, discipleship classes, or Bible study.
Ferouz is from Tajikistan. This is home video of his secret house church smuggled out of the country and obtained exclusively by CBN News. The meetings are small and typically held in a believer's home.
The people in this video know exactly what's at stake. Our parents taught us from childhood that one day we may have to sacrifice our lives.
7 million people live in Tajikistan. 1,000 of them are Christian.
Each life counts. God says, be thankful every day, rejoice in every soul that comes into heaven. That's what keeps us going, one life at a time.
Religious freedom exists in all 5 countries under the Constitution, but barely. While Islam is the dominant religion, a more radical expression is taking root in Central Asia. Dmitry Kabak is a human rights lawyer in Bishkek. He says fear of radicalism has led governments to adopt laws controlling all religions, including Islam and Christianity.
Groups from Saudi, Turkey, and elsewhere come in with a different interpretation and practice of Islam. That worries the authorities. Some of the radical groups have engaged in terrorist activities.
Oleg works in remote villages of Kyrgyzstan. He remembers what it was like spiritually soon after the fall of the Soviet Union.
There was a lot of freedom in the 90s. People could openly share the gospel. But eventually, Islam started to make a move and gain influence.
Up here in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan, the horse is another popular mode of transportation, especially to get around some of these tough terrains and these steep hills. You know, for the believers, this is a spiritual oasis because it's an opportunity to get away from the almost a daily routine harassment and persecution from the authorities, and to come together in a safe place, a beautiful place, and to get spiritually energized.
The beauty, the backdrop, the scenery, what a wonderful distraction from our daily challenges. To see Kyrgyz, Uzbek, Kazakh, and Tajik believers in the same place at one time is so encouraging. We draw strength from each other. We know we're not in this spiritual battle alone.
Encouraged, refreshed, and re-energized, the believers are back home now, and uncertain of the days ahead. Yet they stand boldly convinced of a calling to make the name of Jesus Christ known, no matter the cost. George Thomas, CBN News, somewhere in the mountains of Kyrgyzstan.
Welcome back. Independence Day is just a week away, and the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission is not taking any chances. Today, the organization held fireworks safety demonstrations on the grounds of the National Mall in D.C. Data shows that 60% of all fireworks injuries occur around this time. CPSC says it's important to know which fireworks are safe.
Consumers should only use consumer fireworks, never use professional, illegal, or homemade fireworks. If you're going to use consumer fireworks, follow these simple steps. Have a dry, flat surface, always have a water hose available, never bend over a firework when you light it, and never pick up a dud.
Good advice there. Last year, more than 5,000 people were treated in emergency rooms across the country. Hopefully you weren't one of the thousands, and hopefully you'll stay safe this year. Well, that's all for this edition of NewsWatch. Remember, you can email us your comments and questions at newswatch@cbn.com. Hope you'll join us next time.